Did you know over 50% of business leaders and owners do not have a succession plan? That is nuts. Succession plan is such a powerful tool to be able to retain key talent. Why do we want to retain key talent? Because to replace them is super expensive. In this particular podcast, we want to talk about succession planning and not just succession plan B. I call it, which comes from my third chapter in my book, Getting Your People to Step Up. It's called Plan A, B, and C. One of the things we need to do is we want to coach some emerging leaders and we want to develop our succession plan. Succession plan is such a powerful tool to be able to retain key talent. Why do we want to retain key talent? Because to replace them is super expensive, whether you've got 3 staff or 3,000 staff. People are more likely to stay in a business, which gives you clear paths for your career advancement. And the other thing that succession planning does, it actually shows from a business leader and owner's perspective to the people that there is a commitment for people development and growth. So we want to be able to get people that they can see the future for themselves in this particular business. Succession planning also identifies the gaps that exist between the business and the roadmap that you need in order to be able to get from one part of the ladder, or let's call it, to the other part of that. It's really important as business leaders and owners that we continue to invest in our people's training and development, because it prepares them not only for the current roles, but future roles. And with so many things changing, including things like AI, we need to make sure that we continue to engage our people and not lose them at different places. So I believe that succession planning is really, really important, but we need to be very clear. And it's one of those problems we don't often want to think about because there's so many other operational problems that we're trying to solve on a day-to-day basis. And so we get very busy with what I call the busyness disease, where we're so busy working on it that we've actually stopped to think about the future in terms of what they do. When I'm coaching people, and one of the questions that I ask them is, so have you thought about what are the passions that you want to master, how you want to live your life if you've got X number of weeks left in your life? And the answer is often no. People spend more time planning a holiday than they do planning their life. So it's so important as a business leader and owner that you've got some succession, whether you're choosing to leave that business and move to another job, or if you're the business owner and entrepreneur in that business, what are some of the people that you've got bringing in to your business, and what are we going to be able to do? Succession planners also actually builds a lot of business confidence. So one of the things I've learned the hard way, because I didn't do this very well in certain businesses, was that not only when you have a plan A in place, but if something happens to that plan A and plan A leaves, i.e. the person, then we've got a plan B in place. And the reason you want to have a plan C in place is that plan B would go into the plan A spot, plan C goes into the plan B spot. When we've actually earmarked the people that are potentially going to go in there, even if their names are, penciled in, as we say, not penned in, so they're draft, it comes in so handy when there are changes in the business, particularly for key strategic and leadership roles, that we've actually got some of that thought through, and we've got a document where we've got some places to be able to do that. I wanted to share with you some examples of a particular client who's got, 12 employees. She's the entrepreneur and the business owner. She decided that one of her managers, Sam's going to take over the business when she retires. However, Sam got really unwell and decided not to take over the particular business. So she had no choice but to keep working in the business until she could find that. And you know what? Didn't have a plan B, didn't have a plan C in place. And a lot of the research is talking about that in the US, and this is a global statistic, that up to 2/3 of small businesses do not have a succession plan in place. And a lot of the advisors are saying you really need to know about 5 years out, ideally, in terms of when you are doing that. And people go, oh my goodness, like I've had a business for 15 years, or I've been in this role for, 7 years, whatever it is. And the analogy and the parable that I used is, and I talk about this in the book, is that, Laos trees, they say, when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, right now. When was the other best time to plant it? It was probably 20 years ago, but better late than never. So if you don't have that one, you're listening to this particular podcast, have a look at that. I also talk in the book, Getting Your People to Step Up, about some of the successes and failures. For example, McDonald's with Ray Kroc, who was the visionary behind the global success of McDonald's, really mentored a lot of people. And so there was a number that they had already thought through the system, not only in the business of flipping burgers, but also had really thought the system in terms of succession planning. Yahoo, on the other hand, had a lot of not great succession planning in place. And, as a result of that, sort of, suffered as well. Many small to medium business owners that I've interviewed in this particular book talk about that. Wes Blundy, who runs Curvy, he talks about the fact that, we keep giving our future stars more and more responsibility to see how we can create capability, how they cope with it, what their interests and passions lie. But as a result of we do that, Scott Orpham from MEGD talks about the fact that they do it in the categories of whether that person's ready now as a succession plan, ready in 1 to 3 years, or ready in 3 to 5 years. Then we've also ended up creating a development plan around that. And we know how that part of it works as well, which is super cool. So some of the actions that I want to go through with you is, there are probably 3 key things that we can do around succession planning. So let's go through the first one. The first one is using a model that has been super helpful to me, and it's called the Will Skill Matrix. And it really is there to identify your high potential talent in terms of that. So the model was developed in the 1990s by a couple of guys, Paul Hershey and Ken Blanchard. And really the idea was, and the framework really helped me, was where we look at somebody's skill, and we do that all the time. We look at people's skills in an interview. In fact, they're the ones that are often shortlisted because we believe that their skill is going to help us fill that particular gap in our business. And we hire that particular person. The will was the really interesting part. The will was really how motivated people are to complete that task and do their job well, their willingness or their will. And so one of the things that these 2 guys in the Will Skill Matrix talked about is they've got a 2x2 matrix. And like if you've got low will, low will and low skill, and then you've got high will but low skill, and so on and so forth. So they've mapped that out. I'll talk about this in the particular book as well. And it's really, really easy to map out the skills, as I said. The willingness is also looking at their drive, and you might want some input into that when you be able to do that. And it also then gives you guidelines in terms of the fact that, for example, all the people that we ideally want in our businesses are high will and high skill. But that doesn't really happen. But for example, if they've got a high skill, low will, then how do we actually engage them more? But what if they've got a low skill, but a high willingness to do that? Well, you know what? We can then provide them some additional training. So it starts to give you some themes and some frameworks. And I always suggest to business leaders and owners that you key people you want to map out on the Will Skill Matrix. So you know who's where, and you've got a plan in place for every single person. You want to identify who your plan B is, who your plan C is. Even if all you've done is for your key roles, had the initials down for plan B and plan C, so that when you need it, which you will at times, then be able to do that. The second action I talk about in the book around this particular chapter is how do we actually create a targeted developmental plan for what we call our stars. So our stars, using the Will Skill Matrix, might be the people that are up in that high for both. And so some of the things that we can do is we can send them to some development workshops. We can help them with their leadership skills around communications or decision-making. We also want to pair up people, ones that have been earmarked for succession, with some experienced mentors and managers and leaders in your business. So they can provide them some guidance, give them some insights, and give them some constructive feedback. Because when the person that potentially is going to be stepping up, and we make it very clear to them saying, look, we're not sure how that role is going to come up, or we believe it'll come up in the next 3 years. We would really love, we can't say it's a given, but we'd really love to be able to give you the best opportunity possible to be able to apply and be successful in that particular role. And so one of the things that we want to do is have maybe even look at things like a rotation program where we have people, but then they can get some experience in other departments, especially if they're going to step into some sort of management and leadership roles as well. We can help them understand some of the financials of the business better, and we can also help them really create their own network. So whether that's, helping them with current trends, sending them to certain conferences, looking at a number of different ways that we can develop some of our people so that they can actually start to get more connections. They can start to get more insights and feedback from other managers and leaders. They can start to increase their skill in what would be required to be able to do that. Now, one of the number one questions I get asked is, Shivani, that's all great, but that costs money. I agree. Because at the moment, that person is still in that role, and we are investing some money and time and energy into getting this particular person to be a potential plan B or a potential plan C. I agree. but you've got to look at the costs of if you don't do it. If you don't do it, what will it cost you if one of your key people left? And how quickly could they really take that off? And if the answer is, well, actually, what we really need to do is just only train them in 2 or 3 things, great. Then have a development plan that trains them in 2 or 3 things in being able to do that as well. And the last action that I want to speak about here is how do we facilitate knowledge transfer? Now we have knowledge banks in a lot of businesses where these are repositories, places where we keep a lot of the knowledge database, where we keep information that people can come into that. But unless we actually have effective knowledge transfers, the other strategies go in the bin a little bit. So we want to make sure that there's a really great transition to make sure that the effective critical knowledge is being transferred. So we need to work out who within the business can do that. We want to be able to make sure, whether it's looking at creating manuals or video recordings or documents, that we've got some of that repository in there for business to be able to reach. So having some of your processes mapped out, using some sort of a platform, whether it's as simple as Google Drive or whatever it might be, you want to make sure that there's some things in there that people can access to be able to have that knowledge transfer. You also want to then schedule in some conversations and regular meetings between people that hold that knowledge, but also to the successors that are potentially going to be coming in. And you want to make sure that they've got a great communication happening. And we also want to make sure that there are some systems in place for documentation. We want to thank the people, that have been able to do that. So our real stars are the people that, again, will be able to do a bunch of these things very quickly. And we want to be able to do that. In the book, I talk about Tata, which is India's largest and oldest conglomerates, and it goes back to the 19th century. They've got a variety of different businesses in steel and automobiles and IT, etc. And one of the things they talked about in 2011 in the Economic Times was they talked about succession planning. And one of the things that they did was, how do we get internal talent to step into different roles? Some of this stuff is outstanding. Have a look at the book, have a look on Google, and just have a look at some of the case studies and how they actually plan to do that in Tata. And I think whether you're a small or medium business, it's really great to be able to learn from examples like Tata in terms of what we do and create that. The other thing I do in the book is I ask some questions, and I'd love to be able to ask you these questions. The first one is, have you actually got a succession plan in place? If you do you have a plan A, B, and C? Have you got some names in terms of that? Which level do you think you need to pay attention to? Is it 1? Is it A, B, or C? If I gave you the tool of Will Skill Matrix, could you identify all of the people in there very, very quickly? And who would you earmark as your successor? And so what are some of the plans and training that you need in terms of being able to have that knowledge transfer? And what are the leadership skills that you're actually looking for? And when we're identifying certain leaders, well, who's demonstrated a lot of the value in your business that you ideally don't want to lose, and ideally you would have them taking over your business. And if there is any unexpected changes, how will you do that? How will you actually create that and prepare for the unexpected? Because that's what succession planning is. It's a little bit like, companies plan for if their building was on fire, like where would they have, how would they keep people safe? How would they keep some of the knowledge safe, etc. Now, how many times is that going to happen, or is that even going to happen for all businesses? No. But unless you have that in place, if it happens and you don't have anything in place, then your business is ruined. And from a succession planning perspective, you really want to think about that. If I don't have that in place, my business could be ruined. And one of the things I want to do is to make sure that I've got that in. I hope you got some couple of great ideas that you can put into practice and make happen. Thank you for tuning in. As always, any questions that you have, please ask me. My website is Ask Shivani. I'm Shivani Gupta, and you've been listening to the Grow Your Business podcast. I hope you got one idea that you can think about or perhaps even implement straight away in your business. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn under Ask Shivani. Remember, I call it Ask Shivani, so please send me your questions that I can address in this podcast for you. And I would also so appreciate if you went to the Apple Podcast to rate and review this podcast.